Hello BookTube, Books with Banks here with my first official book review on this channel. Now, this is a strange one probably for some of you, especially if you're subscribed because of my epic fantasy and/or Malazan content. This is a review today of a book I've recently finished reading as a part of a book club that I'm in with my fiance and our friends. Some of what we've read has been pretty hit or miss, and if you keep watching this video, you'll see how I feel about this book in particular. And this will be spoiler free. However, I'll say that I might give away a little bit as far as where the themes and the tone kind of changes. So really, really light spoilers. Anyway, without further ado, to begin, I'll say up front that this is easily my favorite book I've read so far this year as a part of this book club. I just don't want anyone to be surprised by the end of the video that I wasn't more critical. If you were expecting anything like that, I actually might say I love this book. But let's get into the what of actually what it is. So this is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, I think is the pronunciation of the last name there. This was published in June 2022. This is the first book I've read by Ashley Poston, and from a quick Google search, it looks like she's written about 8 or 9 other romance novels, but I'd be curious if her other romances have some light fantasy, fantastical kind of elements as well, like this one did. What do I mean by fantasy elements? Well, let's get into a little bit of the actual premise, the plot of this book. So the main idea is that we have a ghostwriter named Florence Day, and she ghostwrites for a famous romance novelist. So think like someone like Debbie McComber or Danielle Steele on that kind of level of prestige and amount of books and stuff. So anyway, we begin with Florence Day, the ghostwriter, living as kind of an embittered, callous denizen of New York City, and she has to tell her new editor that she doesn't believe in true love and writing love stories anymore. But then tragedy strikes, and she has to return home to her small town and her family. Small town so much different than the New York City she currently lives in. And by the way, her family owns and runs a funeral home, and even more than that, more dramatic than that, Florence Day can also talk to ghosts. So what might sound like a bit of a bizarre, maybe a dreary and macabre setup for a novel, actually I think builds into something thematically focused and ultimately hopeful. So let's start off by looking at theme, and then everything else like character and plot should fall into place. I'll say that this book is pretty clearly about the grieving process and how lonely and isolating it can feel to go through a time where there's been a recent death in the family, even when you're surrounded by family, how you can still feel pretty isolated. But a little bit deeper than that, I think Poston, in this book here, she's balancing two different types of love story as well. On one hand, you have the romantic type of love, and on the other hand, you have that more familial, unconditional love. And while our protagonist starts off the book relatively closed off to the idea of falling in love, which is a typical trope of romance, I think. You know, you start off with the protagonist not believing in love as much anymore, just waiting for that right person to come along and convince them otherwise. While that is, I think, a more typical trope, I think Florence Day also starts off holding her family and the love that they all have for her at distance, or at a bit of a distance as well. And the main character, she's not comfortable about all of these ideas of love because of her strange ability to talk to ghosts. And that ability led to why she doesn't want to think about home or family that often. But then two things happen that simultaneously jumpstart Florence's journey towards rebuilding her faith in both of these types of love. The first thing is a death in the family means that she has to come back home and spend a lot of time around her family members and kind of try to imagine and learn and try to understand the different ways in which her family members all might still love and care about her. But then also, what's happening simultaneously is she's visited by a ghost, as she often has been in the past, but this time this ghost is actually inspiring her to begin her own kind of personal journey back to the hopeless romantic and fan fiction smut writer that she once was. And I felt that Poston balanced both versions of Florence learning to love again brilliantly, regardless of how either of those journeys turn out in the end. And Poston, she's always building and intertwining both storylines towards their, I guess to avoid spoilers, I'll call them bittersweet conclusions. And telegraphed early on, one conclusion would be a bizarre life celebration type of funeral, and the other conclusion would be helping her new ghost friend in some sort of way, again, to keep it as vague as possible to avoid spoilers. So what could have been a depressing and dreary story actually grew into a very hopeful and optimistic one, all about a young woman trying to find faith in love, two different types of love again. And to add on top of all of that, Poston has one of the most charming and addicting writing styles and voices I've ever read. For one, she'll refer to depression mac and cheese at the beginning of the book, and then at the end of the book, celebratory mac and cheese. And in both instances, Poston makes those expressions really relatable, and not to mention how well both of those phrases signal the emotional journey of the protagonist. Poston will also sprinkle in pop culture references, like referencing Stars Hollow or X-Files fanfiction or Taylor Swift, and so on, thereby giving her characters this sense of warmth and familiarity. And I think Ashley Poston's sense of humor is wonderful too, and it's never disrespectful of the fact that this is ultimately a book about death, but always I think she times the jokes right, and she always has the right tone to the humor that's in here, and you know she understands that we don't need any kind of calloused or crude humor, but rather we need something more like cute puns and a quote-unquote mayor character who made me laugh out loud every time he showed up. If you've read the book, you'll understand what's so great about the mayor. But beyond her voice, her themes, her real and grounded characters, I felt that Poston has written a charming love story about the grieving process, as bizarre as that sounds. And in the end, not only do we go on this journey of trying to understand two very different types of love again, but more than that, we follow Florence Day along in learning to have faith and confidence in herself as a ghostwriter and as an author again. Yeah, I think that does it for my first review here. Thank you so much for watching. I know I typically talk more about epic fantasy, but I couldn't resist the urge to talk about a book that really just put me in such a great mood. Thank you all so much, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks, have a good one. Bye.